Right, it's Mrs. Reed and welcome to our poetry lesson. Today we'll be starting a new poem, but before that I'd like you to be ready to start. So first of all, what do we need? Well, you need to make sure please that you have got a pen or a pencil, something to write with, that you have some paper or perhaps an exercise book so that you can record the notes from this lesson. And I would like you to make sure, please, that you're distraction free. So if you get rid of your phone, maybe turn it on silent or off, pop it in another room. Make sure you're ready to fully focus on this lesson. And in a moment, I would like you to pause the video and copy down today's title and date. Underline them with a ruler. And you may wish to write the numbers 1 to 4 in the margin, ready to start our retrieval quiz. Okay, pause and do that now, please. Okay, so today's retrieval is 4 questions, and they are asking you to recap your learning from your last 2 lessons this week, and that was on the poem Out of the Blue. So I would like to know, number 1, which important moment in history was captured in the poem Out of the Blue? Number 2, what do we mean when we use the phrase out of the blue? Number 3, what technique beginning with the letter M is used to describe a speech that's presented by a single character? And number 4, can you complete the line of this poem? So this is asking you to think back, see if you can recall a line of poetry. The line is this, it says, I am waving something, small in the clouds, but something, something. So, pause the video and see if you can answer those 4 questions now, please. Okay, let's go through our answers. You may wish to use another coloured pen to mark here and correct. So, well done if you got that. Number 1 was 9/11. That was the historic event that was explored within the poem through the poet giving a voice to one of the victims. Number 2, when we say something is out of the blue, we mean it happened suddenly, unexpectedly, and without warning. Number 3, the word used to describe a speech presented by a single character was a monologue. Well done if you got that one. Check your spelling of it. And number 4, this one was asking you to recall a line from the poem. Now, we looked at the technique yesterday of repetition, and this was a good example of repetition. You can see that the verb waving was repeated in the poem 4 times. So check your answer and give yourself a mark out of 4, please. Okay. So this topic is called the point of poetry. So we're always thinking about why. Why use the poetic form to present these ideas? And what can poetry help to communicate to the reader? So far you have looked at war poetry, as well as a poem written about a significant historical event. So we have really looked at how poetry is able to capture the human experience of important moments of history and explore universal human emotions and experiences. So as we go on today, we're going to look at how poetry can be used in other ways too, perhaps to help us understand the lives and experiences of others, as well as to argue for political and social change. So today's poem is called Caged Bird, and our question for today is, how is symbolism used in the poem? We need to start with that word then, symbolism. In a moment, I'll be asking you to copy down a definition. But first, let's explore it further. Symbolism is a noun which means the use of symbols to represent bigger ideas or qualities. Writers often use symbols in their texts to convey to the reader larger meanings and messages. In fact, when we think of a symbol, we think about what other associated meanings or connotations it may have. Let's look at the example below, the colour red. Well, we can often use colour symbolism in our writing. So if we see the colour red as a symbol, I would like to know, what ideas does it represent, or what are its connotations? Can you pause the video, write down a definition, and complete the task? Okay, so the colour red as a symbol might represent multiple different things. If we think about it as a negative representation, red quite often symbolises danger. However, depending on its context, it can also have a very different meaning. So we might think that red could represent a feeling such as love or romance. I know through your study of Chaucer that you explored both colour and animal imagery and their connotations. So you already have experience with exploring symbolism in a text. In this lesson and in tomorrow's lesson, we'll be looking at how we can use the words, different forms of the word. So talking about the noun, symbol, using the word as an adjective to describe something as symbolic, or using the verb symbolise when we are analysing text. Okay, let's look at some more examples to explore this idea further. So, as I mentioned before, I know in your prior learning that you have explored the connotations of different animals and how a writer might use animal imagery to represent bigger ideas in a text. So I want you to practice. Let's look at the two pictures. We have a dove and a lion. Each of these has very different connotations. So I would like you to pause the video and tell me, if a dove is a symbol, what ideas does it represent? And if we look at a lion as a symbol, what ideas does it represent? You may wish to sketch a small icon to represent each animal too. Pause the video and do that now, please. Well done. So hopefully you've had time there to explore the connotations and the ideas suggested by each of these animals. Let's have a look. Okay, so we may have said that a lion represents ideas such as strength and power, leadership and bravery. And a dove, very different connotations here, might represent ideas of peace and tranquility, or purity and innocence. Can you notice that the words that I've used here to show what each of them represent are abstract nouns? Okay. Hopefully this is reminding you of some of the learning that you've done already on this topic. Now let's have a go at linking it to our poem. Okay. Throughout the poem Caged Bird, the poet uses two contrasting symbols. The first is an image of a bird flying. The second is an image of a bird inside a cage. I would like you to think about what different ideas might be symbolised or represented through the use of each of these images. Let's start with the flying bird. Let's imagine a small bird flying high across a clear blue sky. What ideas might the flying bird represent to us? And why might that be? Try to make these abstract nouns where possible. Can you pause the video and write those down now, please? Okay, let's do exactly the same for the caged bird. Let's imagine a small bird inside a cage that's then kept inside somebody's house as a pet. What ideas might the caged bird represent that are very different to that of the flying bird? Why do you think this? Pause the video and write down both of your ideas, write down your answers to both of those questions now, please. Okay, so I'm going to go through some examples here, and I would like you to add to your notes as we go. If you think that there's some good words that I've used or some ideas you think, brilliant, yeah, I didn't think of that one, miss, or oh, okay, yeah, I get it now. I would like you to add them in as you go. Okay, let's start with the flying bird. What ideas does it represent? Okay. Well, the first idea that springs to mind when I think of the flying bird is ideas of freedom. I think of the bird being able to fly freely across the sky and perhaps have control over where and when and how it wants to fly around. I think of the free bird flying in an unrestrained way. Perhaps maybe flying conjures up to us ideas of freedom and choice and happiness. In contrast to this is the caged bird. The caged bird isn't able to fly freely. The caged bird might be imprisoned, confined and trapped. It might conjure up ideas of a lack of freedom, the inability to choose what you do, where you go and when. It might have connotations of being controlled by others, not being able to make your own choices. And as a result, it might have more negative feelings such as sadness. Can you see how, through the use of a bird, two very different ideas are being communicated to the reader? One, an image of freedom and joy. Another, the image of imprisonment and confinement. Okay, I think it's time for us to read the poem through. And then I'm going to ask you to give me your opinion. What do you think that this is a poem about? Let's read it then. Caged bird. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped, and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped, and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. Okay, I hope you can hear as I'm reading that poem aloud that the tone and the voice of the poem changes from stanza to stanza. If you listen, you can hear when the free bird, the flying bird, is described, that the language is so much more positive and happy. But, see those conjunctions that signal to us a shift and a change in the voice. But, when they describe the caged bird, the language shifts to become much more negative. We have words like clipped and tied and rage and fearful. So there is a clear contrast in the imagery and the language used. Okay, it's time for a bit of a personal response. I'd like you just to pause the video and tell me at this point, what do I think this is a poem about and why? Do that now, please. Okay, I'm going to go ahead actually from this one. So it's time to build in a bit of context and to tell you a bit more about the background of the poem here. So we need to know about the poet. So Maya Angelou was a poet, a writer, a playwright, a social activist and a teacher. She was born on April the 4th in 1928 and grew up in rural Arkansas. Much of her writing reflects her experiences as an African American woman in the United States. Angelou published multiple volumes of her poetry, which earned her a Pulitzer Prize nomination. The first book of her autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, won the National Book Award in 1970. In 1993, Angelou read one of her poems, On the Pulse of the Morning, at the inauguration of President Clinton. She also received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the highest civilian honor in the United States, from President Obama in 2010. Angelou died on May 28, 2014, at the age of 86. Okay, I would like you to pause the video and write down 3 facts about Maya Angelou's life. Okay. It's also important to note that the poem Caged Bird was written during the Civil Rights era. This is a period when black activists in the 50s and 60s fought for desegregation of African Americans and for racial equality. So the symbols of the caged and the free bird in this poem can be seen as an extended metaphor. They can symbolize and represent ideas about the segregation during the civil rights movement. I want to just check your understanding here. Based on what we've read of the poem so far and of the context, which of these 3 statements do you think best sums up the message of the poem? Is it A, that to prepare yourself for sadness and loss, you need to be stoic, simply accept loss as a part of life? Is it B, to consider how social injustice creates a life where some are free and some are not? Or is it C, that the poet or the speaker is sad about being trapped in a relationship where they really just want to be free and by themselves. Okay, can you pause the video and write down the statement, please? Okay, so hopefully here you should have identified that B is the correct answer. That through the symbols of the caged and the free bird in the poem, Maya Angelou actually starts to explore ideas of social injustice and inequality. She looks at how people may be treated differently and how some people may be treated free and experience all the joy and wonder that comes with that, whilst others are imprisoned or trapped and are having to sing and argue for their freedom in a way that is just completely unjust and unfair. Okay, I'm going to ask you to do one more thing for me in order to prepare for tomorrow's lesson. Okay, so tomorrow we are going to be analysing this poem in more depth. We'll be looking more at the language and writing a what, how, why paragraph. But for today, I want you to prepare for that, if I can go back here, by writing down some quotations, okay? So I would like you to have a look at the poem again, and I'll put it back on screen for you in a moment. And I want you to think about these ideas of freedom and imprisonment, the two contrasting ideas that run throughout the poem. In fact, I would like you to select for me 3 quotations which represent these ideas. Now, the best way to do that is to look at how each stanza changes to focus on either the free or the caged bird. Choose 3 short quotations that symbolise ideas of freedom in the poem, and 3 which symbolise ideas of imprisonment. Okay, I am going to go back to the poem now so you can see it, and you'll want to pause the video here to complete that task. Okay, so hopefully you've been doing all right there, going through and choosing your 3 quotations. What I would do now is just give you some examples of mine you can compare to your own, and then if you've perhaps not managed to find 3 for each, you can borrow some of mine too. So I have chosen these quotations. So for the free bird, the flying bird, that symbolises ideas of freedom, I've chosen these 3 quotations. Now, there are others that you could choose, but I thought these are particularly strong ones for exploring how the message is constructed. I've chosen number 1, leaps on the back of the wind. And I really liked that imagery. I thought that was quite a powerful, free kind of movement to be jumping and leaping in the air. Number 2, I chose the quotation, dares to claim the sky. That's something very bold and confident, like they're taking a risk. And number 3, I chose names the sky his own. Again, I thought that was a freedom, like you're able to control and to name something, to make it yours. For the quotations representing imprisonment then, I've chosen stands on the grave of dreams. I thought this was a particularly bleak image of dreams being destroyed and killed in some way, and I thought, yes, that gives me lots to really explore in my next lesson. I've also chosen number 2 because I thought this was a good idea of something being restricted. His wings are clipped, I think you could have had that, or the legs being tied. Both of those things are about kind of being trapped. And the final one, that powerful line of singing for freedom, the idea of not actually having it, but only singing and using your voice is what is going to give you that bit of freedom. So I think there's 6 really powerful quotes there that I can use to explore the meaning of the poem next lesson. So I want you to make sure, please, that you have got 6 quotations down. If you want to use some of mine, please do so. You're more than welcome to. And I would say that probably takes you up to your 45 minutes. If you've still got a little bit of time, there is one more task to complete. So I will go on and just go through that if you have time. However, if you have done all that you can and your time is up, well done for today. Good job, and use those 6 quotations, please. Have them to hand for tomorrow's lesson, where we will be analysing them in more depth. Okay, so my final task was there, and just there for those who had a little bit of time left, and this was really to return to something that you wrote earlier. I'd asked you earlier to give your opinion on what you thought the poem was about, and I thought it was a good opportunity to bring us back to why the intention of writers using poetry as a way to communicate different ideas. So back to the idea of the point of poetry. So using this and what you've learned about the poem and Maya Angelou so far, can you rewrite that earlier statement? So I think that this poem is about, tell me some more ideas. You may wish to use some of the words at the bottom, freedom and oppression, imprisonment, equality and opportunity, and just spend 5 minutes, no more than that, just writing down and summarising your thoughts on the poem so far. Okay, once you've done that, if you want to, you can send a copy of your work over to your teacher. I'm sure they would be happy to have a look at it, and I'll see you back here tomorrow so we can explore the language and structure of the poem further. Bye!